We are thrilled today to present to you Giselle Jones, and her topic is Everyday Mindful Intimacy. And Giselle is a psychotherapist for general issues such as sex therapy and sex and love addiction. And following a career as a performer in youth education, she achieved her master's in social work from UCLA. She has served in LA as a staff therapist for children and adolescents at D.D. Hirsch Mental Health Services, and as well as here at Center for Healthy Sex. And she's no longer with us on our clinical team, but a very valued member of our alumni and our community. She's currently in private practice, and she has a passion for creativity and social justice, and formerly served as the first director of education for the nonprofit youth poetry organization called Get Lit Words Ignite. And beyond youth education and clinical social work, she's also used her creativity to collaborate with psychologists and police sergeants to train New York Police Department recruits to sensitively manage people struggling with mental illness. And she also engaged in role play to enhance medical students' work with patient care skills and diversity and sensitivity to patients' needs. She's also a 200-hour level certified Hatha yoga instructor, and is very passionate about integrating mind-body wellness, and as well has received her certification in mindfulness facilitation from UCLA's Department of Psychiatry. And then in her spare time, because she's such an overachiever, she also facilitates a volunteer meditation at the LA Central Public Library. So I'm sure you'll get a lot out of today's presentation. Giselle is a wealth of knowledge and passion for her topic and very dynamic. So please enjoy your presentation today with Giselle Jones, and thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you. Thanks so much, Douglas. And I really do miss my colleagues over at Center for Healthy Sex. It's a wonderful place to work, and the work there is just really fantastic. Really comprehensive, really fantastic. So I highly recommend it for both people who are clinicians who would like to check it out or consult or work there, as well as for anyone seeking help and support there as a client. So yes, hi everyone. My name is Giselle. I am, as he said, a psychotherapist, but also a certified mindfulness facilitator trained at the Mark Institute, the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA. And I really loved my work there. It takes the tradition, the spiritual traditions, or all the traditions, and honors them of where mindfulness comes from, but takes a secular approach. So whatever I do when I lead a mindfulness practice, and the way I was taught is meant to be highly inclusive and guided by the practitioner. So if you get any other benefit from it, great. But I really am here to honor the practice and the research that's been done around the physiological effects of mindfulness. So mindfulness, big buzzword these days. It's everywhere in the zeitgeist, and all of you may know what that is or have some meaning or relationship to it. But just in case, I'm going to borrow the definition from John Kabat-Zinn about what mindfulness is. So I really like that. I find it also very inclusive. And that is paying attention to the present moment deliberately and with as little judgment as possible. So with non-judgment, or let's say for the sake of non-perfection, with as little judgment as possible, paying attention to the present moment. And I like to add with compassion or with curiosity for what's going on. So that is, a fairly basic concept intellectually, but can be difficult to practice with all of the chaos constantly going on inside of our bodies, outside in our environments, planning, all of the things that have affected us throughout our entire lives, our traumas, our gains, our strengths. It's an often daunting process and challenging, but can be rewarding even in incremental doses, meaning just practicing a little bit of mindfulness can often garner really great responses. It's tied to, meaning it correlates with, we're not talking about it causes or it's the only thing contributing to these things, but it correlates with a decrease in depressive symptoms, anxiety and stress, and even some physiological things like cortisol levels, and which would then lead to a decrease in inflammation in the body and possibly disease. But we have to be careful not to look at it as a panacea or a cure-all, because we tend to do that with things when they become very trendy in our culture. But certainly just take what works for you. And that's what I'll ask today. We'll be limited by the fact that you're not live in front of me, but I might bring in some practices and I'll remind you again, whatever works for you, take it. What doesn't, leave it. If it feels unpleasant in a way that you don't want it to be challenging, then just leave it. So mindfulness, paying attention to the present moment deliberately, with non-judgment and compassion, can be done in a variety of ways. You may think of, the monks meditating, or a bunch of yogis or just Californians meditating in a seated position. That can happen on the ground, on the floor. It can be standing. But yeah, certainly meditation, traditional meditation, is one of the mainline practices, because without a lot of stillness, without a lot of other distraction, it's very effective. But it can be something as general as appreciation of art or poetry, that feeling of being really drawn in to any present moment. It can be walking in nature. It can be the feeling that you have when you really surrender to the feeling in the shower. And we'll talk about that as well. But it can also be something that I believe can be practiced between people, relationally. How present can we be with another person? It can be very intense, just to be human, just to show up for yourself is a very, very intense experience. Even if it's not a negative emotion or experience that you're having, but certainly fear, anger, sadness, those things can be very overwhelming. And we can have a lot of ways of escaping that, disappearing into numbness or dissociation or substance use, or just, and I consider it a kind of a substance use as well, but falling back into our electronics, really habitual electronic use, or having compulsion or control issues around food. All of these are ways that we sometimes can escape temporarily, or feel like we're escaping the intensity of being alive, of this human experience. But you take that intensity of just being human and you add another person, especially someone who's close to you or you're having a close or doubly intense experience with, and that really, it intensifies the whole thing to an exponential degree. So it can be challenging to show up, whether it's in sex or any other kind of intimacy with another person, when we're not practicing it on a daily basis. So I want to talk about intimacy as well for a little bit, and I feel like we all have an idea of what intimacy is. Often intimacy is used interchangeably these days with sex and sexuality, which I feel is a misnomer, because sex ideally can, and let's say should be able to, doesn't always have to, should be able to happen with intimacy. But intimacy is its own thing. And I don't know who coined it, but it was, it's kind of like a corny short term, into me you see. Intimacy is allowing another person to see us in a very vulnerable way. And I believe it's not only the willingness, but the ability to allow ourselves to be seen. We need both of those things because we can have one without the other. We can want to be seen and not be able to overcome all of the walls that we've built up to protect ourselves, sometimes for very good reason. But also the ability, but also the willingness, because sometimes it feels pretty gnarly to be seen. It's overwhelming at times. And also the ability and the willingness to see another person at the same time. That's the definition of intimacy that really resonates with me. The ability and willingness to be seen in a vulnerable way, and the ability and willingness to see and see another person in their own vulnerability. So how can mindfulness help that? Well, first, I think for us to be able to show up with someone else in that way, I think to be able to tolerate, like I said before, our own intensity of being human needs to be embraced first. So you may want to be able to be very connected and deep and have a beautiful either sensory or sexual experience or relational experience with another person. It doesn't even have to be, it can be a platonic relationship with intimacy. But if it's uncomfortable for you to even be in your own you-ness, your own sense of self, your own body, that's going to be very difficult. That's where the ability might rub up against the willingness. So there are times during the day, I mean, there are all sorts of exercises that people have in the sex therapy world to connect with their partner. But if we can do these just little incremental things for ourselves throughout the day, I think that can ease the accessibility of mindful intimacy for ourselves when we really want it to be called upon, or when it's really challenged by something threatening or chaotic in our lives. So just to get us a little grounded where we are now, whether you have a mindfulness practice or a meditation practice or not, I'm going to invite you to just join me if you'd like, and if you're in a position to do so. If you're driving, keep your eyes open. But just to find a comfortable seat, just to ground, or just for a couple minutes, and then we'll do a little bit more in a moment. Find something that feels comfortable, as a comfortable posture, seated or standing, or even laying down, although I caution against falling asleep. It's a little harder to stay awake sometimes, but whatever's comfortable for you and feels like an alert posture, ideally. Sometimes people call it a noble posture. Sometimes I think of it as being pulled up and then releasing and softening around that. If you'd like to, you can, and you're not doing something that you need your eyes open for, you can close your eyes. That's not always comfortable for everyone, so you can always just keep your eyes open and look at a spot. Just a single spot, maybe down and slightly in front of you. And just to see if we can fall a little more deeply into our own experience. Just tolerate the intensity of our own humanness. I'm going to invite you to draw your attention to the sensation of being held right now. And I mean literally the physical sensation of being held. The pressure of the chair, if you're seated, underneath you. The parts of your body that are meeting the ground. How your own body supports itself. Where are your hands resting? Each vertebra supporting the next, just paying attention to how your body, and its wondrous synchrony just takes care of itself in certain ways. If you're breathing through your nose, perhaps you are experiencing the gentle meeting of your lips or your eyelids. What does it feel like to be held? How are you noticing that you're held or supported in space right now? And notice the parts of you, again, without judgment for the parts that can't or won't do that right now, but noticing the parts of you that are able and willing to just give over a little bit of effort to that being held, to surrendering to it. And perhaps just to emphasize or even ease that surrender, taking a deep breath in through your nose if you can, and out. Again, maybe 2 more times in, and exhale. Just noticing what's able and willing to be held. 1 more time, inhale, and exhaling. Allowing your breath to just return to whatever its natural state is right now. And perhaps drawing your attention, just shifting it. I like to call your attention when it's placed like being anchored. So just picking up the anchor of your attention and placing it in the experience of hearing right now, of the sounds around you that are meeting your experience without straining. Noticing the sounds in the room. Outside of the room. Maybe if it's very quiet where you are, you might even hear sounds from your own body, of your stomach or digestive system, or your swallows. And you can stay there if you'd like, or you can lift the anchor of your attention and place it in the experience of breathing. Again, physically noticing your breath, perhaps the expanding and contracting that's naturally happening at your belly, the rise and fall of your chest, perhaps the tickling at the opening of your nostrils. Just choose one place where your breathing is apparent. Noticing how your other organs in your body give way. Make space for the swelling of your breath as it comes into your body. And how they move back into place as your breath escapes. And just even now releasing that effort. And just noticing if there's a change, if you've noticed it, and there might be and there might not be, a change in your physical experience, or maybe even in your mental experience from then when you first closed your eyes or lowered your gaze at the beginning of this practice. And in a moment, I'm going to play the sound of a bell. And you can listen to the entire resonance of the bell, however that reads through your computer or your device. And when you can no longer hear it, then gently, just gently, blink your eyes open or raise your gaze. Nice. Thank you for joining me if you were able to. And if there's even a word or a few words that are coming up for you that you noticed in your experience, I invite you to type it and send it. There's a little chat that you can type in a box and just hit enter. Um, perhaps you noticed that, perhaps you noticed no change. Perhaps you noticed that there's some distress or pain in the body that might even have become more pronounced. Perhaps you noticed a softening either in your mind or in your body somewhere. Just share with me if you'd like. Okay, thank you. I'm hearing pleasant. I noticed slowing down, headache. So like I said, sometimes it can really pull you into the experience of suffering in a way. Sleepy. Yeah, if we're sleepy and we don't really know, or we have a certain thing going on in our body, sometimes paying attention, you're like, oh wow, sleepiness feels like weight or heaviness. Sometimes it feels good, sometimes it feels distressing because you can't fully give over to it. More focused. Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, everyone. So for all of those things, I think they all kind of fall into being drawn more deeply into your experience, because these things are happening in your body. Pain, fatigue, hunger, or you can slow yourself down enough to be more present with it. So it's not necessarily about eradicating our experience, but it's changing our relationship with it. When we feel like we can face our experience more directly and kindly, sometimes the aversion to it, which sometimes is just a shutting off, you don't even realize that you're pulling back against something. It can help us expand a little bit more sometimes to be more fully present in our lives, to be more fully engaging. I have some sounds, which is good because it's good to incorporate things, but I don't want to distract you. So give me 2 seconds. I'm going to close a window that might be a little too loud here for you. I was going to talk about sounds in our environment when they're a little distracting from another practice like breathing that we might be doing, and it's great to just incorporate it, to just incorporate what's happening. So if a sound becomes more compelling than something else that you're doing, or another sense or sensory experience becomes more compelling, rather than being like, this isn't happening, paying attention to it for a second, giving it a little attention, giving it the love of your attention. And then perhaps when it's a little less compelling, going back to whatever practice you'd like, which can be helpful for all sorts of things: parenting, partnership, pain, a lot of things. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I want to make this inclusive for people who are in partnership and who are not in partnership, but we talked about just having more intimacy with self to have more intimacy with others. One of the things I wanted to talk about is eye contact. This can be, I want this to be something that you take to the extent that it's helpful for you. We all have different experiences around eye contact, and for some people that's a very intense physiological charge from it, and it's actually quite unpleasant. But for those of you for whom it's okay, it's tolerable, I want to invite you to, for the next week or so, or the next little time, to notice what your eye contact is like and with whom you can make eye contact. And obviously, there's going to be an appropriateness about it. And how long you hold eye contact is often, we have social cues around things like that. But what is it like in the grocery store when you ask someone for help, to catch their eye first, to say hello, but to say hello with your eyes too? When you walk into a room, It can be daunting to walk into all sorts of rooms. It could be an interview room. It could be um, seeing your next client if you're a therapist out there right now. It could be just anything. Again, when we meet another person, no matter how many times we've met them or no matter how much ease there is, there's often a bump in intensity. And sometimes it's easy just to kind of shut down a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to just practice to see catching someone's eye, particularly when we're all like, in our devices all the time, making sure you have someone's eye and that connection before saying something meaningful. When you walk into a room, if you have roommates or you cohabitate with a partner, to have a meaningful greeting. Because somebody could be sitting watching something, you could walk in the door and just be ready to unload what your day is or what's happening outside the door. Like, I've got crazy construction outside to talk about the crazy construction, people taking up the street. What is it like to come in and make sure that you make eye contact? If it's someone with whom touch is appropriate, like a partner, maybe having a meaningful hug or kiss, and the hug might be a little longer than you normally do, just to land in the presence of that person, to acknowledge the presence of that person and celebrate it even for 5-10 seconds. And this may be something you do all the time, but just notice if you do it, and notice if there's an aversion to doing it as well. Certainly if there's some static, if there's some tension or a conflict going on, this is going to be a different experience if you come into a situation with someone. But even then, making eye contact. So I have a question from Paul here. That's a very interesting question, and one I do not know the answer of, but does the physiology of connection vary depending on one whether looks into the left or the right eye of another person? And the answer for me, Paul, is I don't know, but that's an interesting question considering that we tend to process more intellectual capacities and processes with our left brain, and more emotional and strictly emotional, physiological processes with our right brain. So I'm wondering if you looked into the left eye of the person, which I think is connected to the right brain, if it would be more of an emotional response. That's a really good question. I don't know the research on that, but you could experiment with that. And if there's someone who's willing to give you feedback, or you give them feedback, that might be that in itself is a really intimate exercise and might be a great thing to practice. Thank you. It's a great question. Yeah. So yeah, meaningful greetings, I like to call it, to make sure that it's almost like, hey, like making sure the other person is there, hey, and then continuing with whatever is next, whether it's an embrace, whether it's a concern, whether it's just sharing about the day, whether it's going on with your moment. Even if someone's engaged in something else, maybe just a brief connection like that. That can happen whether you're in partnership or not throughout the day, with people that you encounter, even if you work alone, with people you encounter out in the world, at the store, at the gym, depends where you are. You want to be, if it's midnight and you're at a gas station. I personally am not making deep eye contact, so use your judgment. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, is touch. Just the tactile experience and being open to that and aware of your openness to it throughout the day. So I'm someone who, I think it's because I carried, and I continue to carry a lot gastrointestinally. I think I've always been kind of a tummy rubber. Like, I kind of have always been like an old man, even when I was a teenager, like rubbing my tummy a lot. But there's something very comforting about that to me. And even if you're rubbing, I believe, in a clockwise motion, that can actually aid in digestion. But during some of these exercises, whether it's a meditation or just rest, Placing your hand on a part of your body that seems to just want a little attention can be nice. And we all have places that we like to be touched and we don't like to be touched. So even for yourself right now, you can close your eyes or you can have your eyes open just to take a deep breath in and out. And maybe you noticed something before when we were scanning our bodies and finding places of support. Maybe you also found places where your body was kind of holding a little bit. Some usual suspects might be stomach, chest, neck, shoulders, back, the whole mask of the face, honestly, because we carry so much for facing the world. Um, Putting our right face forward, the forehead, everything around your sinuses. That can be a beautiful place to give yourself a little massage. And your jaw, lips, tongue, jaw. Any of those places and anything else that I might not have mentioned that you can reach. I'm just going to invite you right now to give it a little touch. Just a gentle, gentle touch. And even touching yourself. What does that feel like? Like for me right now, that feels like comfort or a sense of home. Right now I have one hand on my chest and one hand on my belly. And for me, that particular posture feels grounding in a sense of home. So if you do a kind of work where you're seated a lot throughout the day, or you don't take a lot of, physical breaks, I invite you every maybe half an hour, 45 minutes to stand up, to stretch, to take 3 deep, meaning abdominal breaths. And maybe during those breaths or even after them, to just give yourself some touch. And it can be very literal, like the massaging. Or massaging of sinuses, or it can be just, to say your mind is racing and you're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe you put a hand, just giving yourself the touch that you would want a very attuned, intuitive lover to give you. And then you can always ask for it if you have a very attuned, intuitive lover, or just a present and available one. Can I think you've all heard somebody say, can I have a hug? It's that feeling of touch and the moving of that static energy, shifting of it that can be facilitated through touch and certainly through embrace. So even with the sense, bringing things into the sense of touch can be in our everyday thing. We don't even have to interrupt what we normally do. I mentioned before, like the bathing or the grooming process, really staying present, because that's a time where people, if they're in the shower, they're sometimes, mulling over their day or planning their day or, thinking about everything that they need to do. And if you spent half of that time in the shower, just feeling the pressure of the water, the warmth of it, what it feels like to rinse down, the sense of smell, the olfactory stimulation if you use scented products. That can be something that resets you a little higher. Shower's already usually an invigorating experience, but it can reset. The thing with any kind of meditation is to trust that all the thoughts that arise, sometimes it often feels like they're arising in mutiny to the stillness and the presence that you're cultivating. They will be there waiting for you if it's really important. And for those of you who are artists, I know that can be very daunting, because it's like, oh, I have this line of poetry, or I have this concept I really need to write down. And sure, I'm never going to say don't, but oftentimes, most of the time, the ideas that come up as distractions during our moments of stillness will be there waiting for us. And the ones that aren't even that necessary may just go away, but they'll probably come back too. But to trust that, let me just surrender to this moment. We're in such a culture of doing, of have-dos. We take shorter lunch breaks, we work longer hours. Generally, people take less holidays and are available for work if they want to be 24/7 because of, our electronic connection. So to really take that time can feel often radical. And like I said, the shoulds and the have tos can kind of arise in mutiny sometimes, but to allow yourself to have tactile sensation throughout the day. I also said grooming. I'm one for using a lot of creams and lotions, but whatever your grooming is, whether it's shaving, whether it's brushing your teeth, to feel the tactile sensation of that, of washing the dishes, which can make something that often people find a little unpleasant to be once you start it. It's unpleasant to start, but once you start it, can be kind of a surrendering experience. I wanted to talk a little bit about touch in partnership. So you may or may not have heard of something called sensate focus therapy. And sensate focus is a practice that was created by Masters and Johnson in the 60s for partners who may be having functional issues sexually, physically, or mentally, to really, really start from scratch with the experience of touch and the experience of feeling. So in broad strokes, what sensate focus or sensate focus therapy involves is one person radically receiving and the other person radically giving or exploring the other person. It often starts with the instruction to take sex or the concept of sexualized agenda off the table. So the pressure of that, especially if there is a challenge going on right there, can be, alleviated. And again, like that kind of touch, exploring one person, and it can be hard to receive touch or receive pleasure for some of us, without jumping into reciprocity. So with sensate focus, to radically receive is a radical concept indeed. To just receive, to give feedback, verbal and nonverbal, about what feels good and what doesn't. The nonverbal feedback is especially good because it's less tied into your cerebral processes and more of an organic response. And by that I mean just movement or sound, sound, tickle, laugh. The one person who's doing the exploring, it's almost like they are an alien and they've fallen to Earth and they've never seen the beauty of a human body before, and it's just like almost like, what is hair, what is this skin, what is this smell behind this person's ear, and exploring really, ideally very leisurely at first, very slowly and deliberately, with different parts of your body. You don't have to just touch with your hands, you can touch with your face, with your arms, with your belly. For feet exploration, make sure both parties are okay with that. But really, like taking, rules off the table other than what the person who's being touched is guiding, and what the person who's touching might be comfortable with as well. I like to tell people to avoid, bathing suit areas at first, to again take the habitual agenda away from touch, because we fall easily into like, okay, the sexual performance, I need to respond a certain way, I need to elicit a certain response from my partner, and just into exploring. And you may find very subtle erogenous zones, very subtle charges in the body that feel good or don't feel good or don't feel safe. So it can be very instructive as well for both people. So that's kind of a broad stroke version of sensate focus. If you have any questions, you can type them in about that. And I wanted to talk for a moment as well about, let me bring one more daily thing that you can bring in, the act of eating. So food can also be a very intense thing for a lot of people, certainly when they're hungry, but for some people, even when they're not. There's a lot of historical experience around food, from the way it was treated in our families growing up, from the way our bodies interact with it. It can be a very, very sensually powerful thing, or it can be frightening for some people, or boring for others. But the way that we eat has largely, again, this may not apply to anyone listening today, but has largely fallen into an unconscious arena, kind of either unconsciously eating, and not even in any kind of binging way or restrictive way for some people, but just not really conscious. We're eating, we're watching TV, we're on our phones, we're doing whatever. And I invite you to have at least one meal, again, in the next week or in the next couple days. The sooner you do it, the more likely you are to do it. And to really take your time. Like when I do this live, I give everyone one grape, and it's almost like we slow everything down. But just for a regular mindful meal, whether you're preparing it or it's just being plated before you, as you're preparing to eat, thinking about where it may have come from, meaning all the hands that had, aided in the process of that, getting that to your plate. The plants, the animals, the people that raised them, the people that picked or transported the goods, how it got to where it got. You don't even have to go that deeply, but maybe just to think about, wow, there's been a journey here. And then, almost more importantly, as you're eating, whether you're eating something that you pick up or use with a knife and fork, taking that bite, noticing what it feels like, especially that first bite, right before it goes in your mouth, noticing the salivation process, having that bite, noticing all the sensations in your mouth, in the other parts of your body, your skin, and then putting your fork down or putting the item down as you're in each bite. So I don't want to say in between each bite. It's as you're in each bite, until that's finished, and just being in that experience. So this is going to slow it down. So if you're allotted a 15-minute lunch, this is going to be very frustrating and annoying, and you probably won't get your lunch done. But when you have a little more time, half an hour or so, to really take your time, putting the fork down, finishing the bite, being in that bite, as opposed to the next bite, or thinking about what's for dessert, or thinking about or not thinking about it at all. Just see what that experience is like. A lot of that can be somewhat frustrating if you're not accustomed to it, but it can be very, I want to say, arousing, and I don't necessarily mean in a sexual way, but maybe, but just sensorily arousing. And you can really notice what's already happening that we often ignore. Like I said, what is happening in your fingers and your skin and your body temperature. What flavors do you really appreciate, and textures? What don't you appreciate? And just slowing it down. The reason why we practice these daily things is so it's available for us. We're just more habituated to being in our bodies, so that when we really are calling upon ourselves to be present in our bodies, and in the act of sex, or in the act of even exercise, or staying present in the face of perceived danger or intensity or chaos, we're more likely to have this hospitable host of our body that we already know on some level can hold this intensity. So we're more likely to rely on it, and it's more likely to be available to us in ways that we want and can master. So I wanted to finish on a tricky subject on conflict. So conflict, let's talk about that. And conflict can be a very intimate process as well. We often think of intimacy as all the lovey-dovey stuff and all the good feelings and good touches. But being in conflict with someone can be removed and distant, or it can be fairly intimate, where we stay in our vulnerability about what our experience is. So that's a whole other lecture about using your experience as the place where you speak from, as opposed to speaking to the other person about their experience. Very tricky. We're all going to do it imperfectly and quote unquote fail at that, but to the best of our ability, recovering and trying to do that. But before we can get there, we kind of have to be, just say we are in an argument, and it's usually more arousing and distressing the closer we are to someone, the more we care about what they think and feel about us. So tending to ourselves first, slowing down the process of reaction and response, and just noticing what's going in our bodies first, seeing if there's an availability to soften, can be helpful. So there's an acronym that I learned at the Mark Institute, STOP. Very simple. STOP, the S stands for actually just like pausing, realizing that you are caught up, that there is a story about that person or that situation that's got you polarized or has you on the defense, and just even bring yourself out of it. Silently say the word stop to yourself. Take a breath or a couple of breaths abdominally, so expanding from your abdomen, exhaling longer than you inhale. Even if you need to say you're taking a time out, but you might be able to do this without even being perceived as doing this. Stop, take some breaths, that's the T. O, observe what's going on. And when I mean observe, I don't mean try to deal with the thought processes, because right then there's a story that's going to be very, very intense, possibly going on. And it's hard to meet a cognitive thing with a cognitive thing when you're at that level of emotion. So interrupt that by observing, oh, what's happening in your body. And this can take a few seconds. Okay, my chest is very tight. My vision just got very narrow. My temperature went up, I feel warmer. I can't feel my fingers or my feet. Okay, I was just able to take a deeper breath, noticing what's happening in the body, the heart rate. And then the labeling of that actually activates a part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, a little bit more, which takes generally, it's like a balance like this, takes a little bit of activity away from the amygdala, the fight, flight, freeze that makes us feel like our life depends on winning that argument or getting out of that situation, or we just dissociate, or we kind of just check out involuntarily. So labeling what's going on in your body can make that moment a little more inhabitable. So you're present in it. And then P, so that's S-T-O-P. Stop, take a breath, observe, and P is proceed with whatever wise action. Maybe that's then, the nonviolent communication of sharing what your experience is or what you're observing empirically. Maybe that means you take a break, like you say, I have to walk away right now. Maybe that means, P might be taking a risk and leaning in and touching that person and asking if there's something that they need, or saying that there's something that you need. P is whatever seems to be, once you might come down from like a 10 to maybe, let's say, a 7, what is the wise action that feels like you need to do? I do want to add that if you do walk away from a situation, to perhaps give a time, literally like a time or space where you can come back, that you set a date to continue the conversation. So it's not always about fleeing. So that's really brief, a short-term way. But I wanted to see if anybody had any questions. But before we do that, just with the 3 breaths that we did before, I want to invite you to soften, just like you would in a conflict. Take 3 deep breaths in, inhale, exhale. See what there is to soften, your jaw, your shoulders, your belly. Inhale, one more time. Soften your eyelids, fingers, and one more time, inhale, exhale, whatever is able and willing to soften. That might be the T of this T, take a breath. That's kind of what it feels like. Any questions or anything that came up for you, or challenges, anything that feels that you've tried and really wasn't helpful for you or has been? And I'll wait in case anyone's typing, but I want to let you know as well, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me afterwards at Giselle at GiselleJones.com. My name might be up there, but it's Giselle, like the ballet, if you forget, Jones, JONES.com. That's my website, and my email is Giselle at GiselleJones.com. Thanks, Center for Healthy Sex. I just put it up there. Allison, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you introduce partner mindfulness when I'm working with couples. Is there a practice that I generally start with? Yes. If it depends where they are. I mean, but if they're in a relatively non-hostile place, I mean, fairly safe, I might have them look at each other in the eye. And you'd be surprised at people who are, married for a long period of time. It's very common. And I try to make sure that they know that so they don't feel shamed. Just tolerating that, or having them start apart, standing, and start taking steps towards each other. Step, maintaining eye contact, and then sharing one or two words about what's coming up for them in their bodies. Taking another step forward. I might do that. I also do talk about sensate focus therapy if we are talking about sexual issues. Hi, Richard. Giselle, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm going to rewatch it on YouTube. Cool. Thank you. Thank you so much. But yes, and sometimes I do practice, even though like a traditional practice is a solo practice, I might have them practice side by side, at least for a moment or two, to kind of just ground the energy in the room and have their bodies a little more open before they face each other again, so that their minds can be a little more open, ideally. But just starting with a gazing exercise and see what comes up. Sometimes one partner is more of a jokester, or there are hidden resentments that make it difficult, or maybe it's just been a long time since they've fallen into that. Others are really good at it, and maybe we go a little deeper into another kind of exercise, like an appreciation exercise, where one person says something they appreciate about the other person, and the other person just thanks them for it. No commentary, no rejection of it, no acceptance of it, other than thank you. And then they share something about the other person, and to go back and forth with the practice like that. That might be another way of doing partner mindfulness. But I would say the eye contact, the walking towards each other, appreciation, and sensate focus therapy are the main things that I would do with couples in therapy. So I'm going to be jumping off soon. Thank you. Thanks, Allison. And I will be jumping off soon. I just wanted to let you know, thank you so much for taking your lunch hour or just your midday break to join me today. It was really nice. It was nice for me to be here with you and to pause in my day. And again, you can check out my website, Giselle, thank you, Davidson, at GiselleJones.com. All right. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a beautiful weekend. Be safe.